Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to talk a little bit about solar energy. Now, there are three categories of solar energy, and those are photovoltaics, active solar, and passive solar. Now, photovoltaic involves directly converting solar energy into electricity. Active solar is concentrating that solar energy to create heat, and that heat is then used to create electricity. And then passive solar is a little bit different because passive solar is not worrying about electricity. Instead, passive solar is really just trying to absorb that heat energy from the sun. And we'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. We'll start here with photovoltaic solar cells. Now, these are the typical solar panels that you would think of when you think about solar energy. And these are transforming that light energy directly into electricity. Now, you do not need to know the inner workings of photovoltaic solar cells. You really just need to know that it is this direct conversion to produce electricity. Now, photovoltaics have pros and cons just like anything else. The pros or the benefits is that this is generating electricity, and it can reduce the amount of air pollution and habitat destruction that we see associated with fossil fuel energy production. However, there is habitat destruction associated with the use of large-scale solar applications. And there's both large-scale and small-scale applications. Those small-scale applications would be solar panels on the roof of a home, and that helps a family live off the grid, so to speak, where they're not getting most of their energy from the grid itself. Now, those large-scale applications, those are what could lead to potential habitat destruction, especially in fragile desert ecosystems. Another big drawback of photovoltaics is that they are really limited by the availability of sunlight. So a solar panel can only generate peak electricity during bright, sunny daytime. So a solar panel is not generating any electricity at night, and it only generates very little electricity on cloudy days. So this creates a variable source of energy that doesn't necessarily match up with the electricity demand on the grid. Additionally, another drawback is that the materials used to make these photovoltaic solar panels has a limited lifespan. Typically, with panels that are out on the market today, they only last for about 25 to 30 years before their productivity starts to have significant decline. Also, the materials that are used to make these solar panels are non-renewable resources, and they contain several heavy metals that, when mined, impact the environment, and when disposed, impact the environment. Additionally, solar panels are expensive to install. However, they have relatively minimal maintenance costs. And again, these solar farms are huge, and that impacts a large ecosystem as a whole. Again, I also want to emphasize the availability of sunlight on this. Solar farms only make sense in areas that are closer to the equator, that experience much longer days throughout most of the year. So as you get further away from the equator, the daytime becomes more variable, with summers having much longer days than winter. Also, keep in mind that most of the energy use in homes is used for heating and cooling expenses. The second type of solar energy is active solar, and active solar can be broken down into two categories. We have concentrated solar power, and we have solar heat pumps. Concentrated solar power does just what it sounds like. It concentrates that solar energy to a single point. And at that single point, there is a receiver. And that receiver usually has some kind of liquid in there that is heated up by all of this solar energy being directed at it, and that generates steam. The steam is then used to turn a turbine, and that turbine is then connected to a generator, and that generator then creates electricity. Solar heat pumps are a little bit different. These are much smaller scale than that concentrated solar. However, these are again taking that sunlight, collecting it on what looks like a solar photovoltaic array. However, inside that array, it is collecting that heat to warm water, and that hot water is then stored in a tank, and that hot water then goes through a heat exchanger that can be used to heat a home or can be used to generate electricity on a very small scale. Now again, there are pros and cons to all of this. So the pros and cons of concentrated solar power: the benefits would be it generates electricity, so we're getting less electricity from those fossil fuel energy resources. Concentrated solar also can be ramped up to a pretty large scale to supplement these large power plants. But there are also significant drawbacks. Again, just like all of the types of solar power, concentrated solar is limited by the availability of sunlight. So again, these only make sense in places a little bit closer to the equator that receive more direct sunlight throughout the year. These also provide an inconsistent source of energy where we're only generating during the daytime and not so much at night. However, they do generate what's called thermal inertia, so that steam that is heated up and used to turn the turbine that then turns the generator that then makes the electricity. That steam doesn't shut off all at once with the clouds passing over. It has a little bit slower ramp down time, allowing the conventional energy sources to ramp up to meet that demand. However, concentrated solar farms are huge. They impact the ecosystems by disrupting that land use, and they are expensive to build. There are also pros and cons to using a solar heat pump. Again, the benefits is that this is a way to regulate that temperature of a home, reducing the demand for electricity. Again, because most of the energy use in a home is used for heating and cooling purposes. Also, again, a drawback, just like it is for all the other sources, is that solar heat pumps are really limited by the availability of sunlight. So on a cloudy day, they are not generating that heat. So you need to also have a backup system. And that means that this is expensive to have in a home. Long term, it does reduce the energy costs. However, it does cost a lot to install. The third and final type of solar energy that we are discussing in this video is my personal favorite, which is passive solar. Now, passive solar is not used to generate electricity. Instead, this is a building design that helps to regulate the temperature by taking advantage of the angle of the sun during different times of the year. So remember, during the summertime, the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun, causing there to be more direct sunlight because that sunlight is also more concentrated. Then in the winter, that northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, meaning that the solar energy is less concentrated and that sun is hitting at a lower angle. With passive solar design, we are able to build homes and structures that take advantage of this change in the angle of the sun. So what happens is in the winter time, when the sun is at the lower angle, it is going to shine directly through the south-facing windows of that building. But then in the summertime, when it's warmer in that area, the sun is at a higher angle and it is going to be blocked from shining directly into the home by roof overhangs. And this combination allows that home to be warmed in the winter, but remain relatively cool in the summer. Again, pros and cons with everything. The benefits is that passive solar helps to regulate the building temperatures, again, reducing that demand for electricity that frequently is coming from fossil fuel resources. But the drawbacks are that this, again, limited by the availability of sunlight. It only makes sense in areas that experience these swings between summer and winter. And this is pretty difficult to retrofit onto existing buildings. This is something that needs to be done in the initial design and construction process of that structure. Now, in summary, you need to be able to describe how each of the energy sources produces energy, either electricity or heat, and the benefits and drawbacks of each of them. Now, remember the types of solar energy discussed included photovoltaics, active solar, which falls in the categories of concentrated solar arrays and solar heat pumps, and also how passive solar works. Please leave me your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.